Hello, welcome to another episode of Full Circle with me, Onyx. And today I want to continue the discussion of shaman and shamanism. And I kind of want to go into beliefs. In a weird way, shamans don't have beliefs. They don't really see beliefs as solid structures. They're changeable and adaptable. So there's no real religion or organization that can be shamanism. So, and then there's like a paradox because on one level, there's beliefs and structure, especially if you want to train as a shaman. Um, I would say there's many different types of shamans, and shamanism, according to Michael Horner, is someone who is chosen by the tribe uh, to like officiate ceremonies, to conduct ceremonies, births, deaths, funerals, weddings, coming of age ceremonies and rituals. And we kind of tend to think of maybe a shaman as a one man band, someone who wears a hat and it performs many functions. And on one level, this kind of like mystical shaman, this like channel of the universe, can do that. They have this like kind of like divine right. But they're and then shamans can kind of branch off into a few major groups. I would call one are the men of power, the medicine men. It doesn't have to be a woman or a man, like it's not gender specific, but you're like a man, meaning humans, you're a being of power. And so you start working with forces of nature. Um, and so it depends upon what level that you're going to be of service, serving, and there's many levels because obviously you have to train, uh, and the training is a long process. I like to say, to get your black belt, truly to get your black belt is probably 10 years. You know, some people might go to a different school and rush it in 5 or pay more and rush it in 3. But then also, people have their own natural ability, their own adeptship. Some people have natural ties to the unseen world or to working with forces or connection to the earth. And so it's just like anyone. We can all learn piano. Some of us will hate it. Some of us it will be really hard. Others they'll take to it like a fish in water. Um, and so that's really how you know it's your calling. Uh, it's not like no one is really forced into it. We hear these like legends of, shaman awakening stories, and people feel maybe the spirit world called them to it and they were resistant and they had a shaman's illness and they came into it. So we all have our own narrative, whether it's real or not. Um, I would say you're the author of your book, so your narration is how we understand it. So shamans do have a kind of a natural sense of psychology, but it's kind of like behind the beliefs and behind the symbols. Um, and I think one of a really good definition of a shaman is a no limits man, someone who doesn't have limits, and so they're able to do things that the average person can't do. Um, and then and then also I feel like a sh- but then I also feel like shamanism is tied to culture. You know, African shamans have their own way of doing things. Siberian shamans have their own way. Hawaiian shamans have their own way, and Native American shamans have their own way. A lot of people don't realize, but India has shamans as well. And all these different cultures have similar things in common. Um, Shaman is definitely someone who is a mediator between the world of the living and the world of the dead, the world of spirit and gods, and the underworld of demons and power animals and disincarnated spirits. And people don't realize, well, I won't worry about that. So it's a very broad subject. Shamanism is natural to everyone. Like I like to think of man crawling out of a cave, first man or first realized man, where they realized, hey, we're not animals, you know, and they saw like lightning and it was a force and it kind of ruled their life in awe and fear, and we start getting symbols or this idea of we're everything, like, there's gods. We might need to pray to the rain. We might need to pray for a good hunt. The first time you see a stag with like 8 points or more, you might get blown away. That shock, that fear. It's like a god, you know. Uh, so I and so in shamanism, there's obviously it's like I, in a weird way I can't explain it. And that is kind of the point. So I've ran into some really powerful people on my journey. And even in the city, I met this shaman. And she was really cool. And we like got along. And then eventually we parted ways. And so I think she was like one of my first teachers uh, who I ran into. And there's been various forms of teachers, of like minded people. But I remember she told me her story, her backstory about being thrown around, like abused as a baby and remembering it. Then, years later, she joined the army and then she left the army on disability. And then that's really when she started doing healing work with herself. And it was her cat who started to open up her heart to help. So she had all these shaman abilities and very powerful woman. I loved her so much. Um, but it was the healing of her own heart that was really kind of what was going on when we met at that in that point in her journey. And it was really cool because she definitely had connections to star beings and to mythical creatures like myself. And so it was like someone I could relate to. And I remember just really cool stuff going on between me and her, and astral realms and journeys. Like it was one of the first people I met who could journey like myself. We could, and but then I remember I left because I started hearing some of the information was new agey, you know, about Syrians and Palladians and stuff. And I'm like, oh, you're getting your knowledge from books. I gotta go now. And then recently, I left my last friend and guru, instructor of sorcery and mysticism and everything cool. Because that person was as well turning to, like, there's no information, people. You're exploring the unknown with your abilities. But when I I left because they had adopted ideas of like Jesus, they adopted ideas like spiritual evolution for humanity. And so I leave when people have adopted ideas of like a culture or a religion or a movement, because it's open. Living shamanism is open. It's like, why, like, shamans have the ability to connect to spirits in some form or another. It could be through dreams, it could be through visions, it could be a channeling of different forces. And so it's a vast universe. So I couldn't understand why they would like read or adopt ideas and make a belief or a faith, follow a spiritual path, when in a weird way shamans are like intangible. Like, it's like it doesn't stick because they belong to this bigger expanded universe, like quantum level. And so it's like it kind of hinders, I think, when someone tells you uh what something looks like, then there's no room to see it another way. And shamans are famous for seeing it other ways. So a really good example is Merlin, and the story, the King Arthur legend of Merlin. Like, when he was a boy, he saw two dragons fighting under this hill where they were trying to build this tower or castle or whatever it was, and it wasn't working because the dragons were fighting, and he had to basically appease the dragons, but they were also telling a future of like the Norsemen invading Britain. And so there were political things, there were visions, but there were, I mean, that was one version of it. But the reality is there were spirits that needed to, so he was a boy, the divine child in the story as an archetypal pattern, but he had the ability to appease the dragons so then they could build their castle, or maybe they had to move it somewhere else. Who really knows? Uh, but the adults, the people of the world, had a different education. So there was this really great book, and I think it was called Born of Spirit and Water or something like that. And it was on African shamanism. And it talked about a boy who was basically kidnapped from his African tribe and was taken in by the church and French run church and had to be educated that way. Then he ran away and went back to his tribe. And then he had to be reinitiated into the tribe because he was educated. And his very education was considered the white demon, the white man's demon, and wouldn't allow him to be shaman, wouldn't allow him to be mystic and understand and have the abilities of his tribe. And so he kind of had to unlearn. And then later on, he wrote a book about it saying that was his destiny, to learn both ways and write a book and, make it understood, you know. And so yeah, he had a destiny. But the very fact that the white demon got in the way, and that was education. So I find that the white demon gets in the way, and in, in one form is psychology, another form is religion, because you're describing things and it gets in the way of you interacting with the unknown face to face with your own flesh, with your own mind. Like, it puts up a filter, it puts up a mental block. Because, so in shamanism, they're famous for roadmaps. One classic roadmap that we use in the occult is the Tree of Life, with like the 10 Sephiroth and the 22 paths. That is a roadmap. It's and it's kind of in the collective, and all different cultures have used it. Um, but the reality is, well, now it's stabilized as that structure. You can't change the lens. You can't dial it a different way. The Tree of Life is the Tree of Life, you know? So, and the Tree of Life is the model for, it's like how you construct the universe. So currently in the Western model, We have a solar system with planets and they orbit and they spin, and we have astrology and we have astronomy, you know, we have satellites. And this is the lens that we use to explore space and the unknown with the tools that we have. Um, but it's very possible that that whole model will be blown out of the water, you know? So just like when we thought our solar system rotated around the Earth, then we moved it to rotating around the sun. What's the next thing? So, flat Earth theory is another model. What if it was true? You know, so I think in Western culture, we think yes, no, right, wrong, good, evil, true, and false. I'm good, I'm bad. The verdict is punishment, or the verdict is happy salvation, happy ever after. And with these type of concepts in your head, it it's like no wonder why you need drugs to have a spiritual experience, because you the drugs will help break down these models. So do yourself a favor and become like soft clay before it's been fired. You know, don't specialize too much, don't get too overeducated. There has to be flow and rhythm to allow for the spontaneous. So it's like shaman journey, grab a drum, beat, 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 go to your tree, go up the tree, go to spirit realm, talk to your ancestors, retrieve a soul, come back, blow it into someone's body. That's just a model, but it's not the only way to do things. You know, shamanism, the reality of it is you're kind of born it, you're kind of made for it, and whether you're supposed to develop it or not is kind of up to you, but it's also kind of up to the pattern of your life. So it's really trendy is I'm bored with my life, let's go to shaman school. So there's a local shaman school around here, and I remember one year I met the lady who started it all, or at least she claims to have, and I pretty much thought she was crazy. And I was like, really? Okay, bye. So I feel so it's just like we say, ayahuasca is an indigenous, uh, basically natural DMT trip that shamans have learned in like South America. And I'm like, yeah. And, but you using the symbols, or like, so now people are like doing it in their garage or they're like whatever. And it's kind of become like Western yoga. uh, Line up in a line. I even saw people using yoga mats and like yoga blankets and then going on a ayahuasca journey, like on someone's video. I was like, whoa, seriously? Don't you feel like it would be better if you were out in nature and maybe not um, doing it like that? It's too organized. It's too much like a yoga class. Because it's like a yoga class doesn't make it any more spiritual, you know? Or why is there like a teacher? So it's too much like class. It's like, let's all get in a room and talk about stuff. And I feel like that's like directly the opposite of how shamanism works. So I remember when I went to my very first sweat lodge, um, I was actually working and staying at the Omega Institute. And some guy, everyone was getting excited because this guy comes like every year or certain years. I'm not going to say who it is or whatever, because it's just my perspective. Who the fuck am I? So I'm just me on my journey as spirit as I go somewhere. And I remember going to my first sweat lodge. I was like, man, I thought this was like going to be cool. I thought like spirits were going to like come down and shake my hand or something. I thought I was going to get transported to another reality. I'm like going in the sweat lodge like it's a womb. And I thought the whole world outside of me was going to dissolve, and I was like, be flying through space. And then I thought all this mystical, cool stuff was going to happen. And no, there was this guy talking like he had something important to say. I'm like, what the fuck? And then they go into like cultural symbols, like it's a womb and like north and east and the fire and the meaning, and let's do another round, and it's gonna get hot in here. Let's splash some water. And I was like, why are you talking? I'm like, oh my gosh, you're ruining it. You're ruining it. So they did another, and so I was disappointed. But I was like, that's all right. It's just that there were people talking. So it's like, why don't we just like shut up and let the powers do their thing? I thought, you know. So I was like, I'm not going to do that again, not for a while. Plus, my back was hurting. I had to sit hunched over. And it was still really cool. And I have some positive memories from it. But I guess I had a whole. I. My. The way I was viewing it, like with no one telling me how it was going to be, no one boxing me into like a classroom setting. Once again, there's all the students and there's someone who knows something at the head of the class teaching us. The only thing that was different is that we were like half naked and there's some like hot rocks and some spray going on. Like we could have just had this in the hot tub. I was like, why did we? So it's like, I was like, so I was disappointed. I didn't meet my expanded vision of the possibility that it could be. I was ready for someone to throw lightning bolts. I was like, this, are we going to get like Jedi in here? I was like, I was so young and open. So the possibility was there, but the construct that was constructed, to create order out of the chaos, to create sanity, actually kind of like turned off the fountainhead of possibility and power and knowledge that could happen in a shaman experience. I'm like, well, I guess I'll go back to my tent and have a powerful experience on my own, you know? So, oh my gosh, what the freak were we talking about? Yeah, we get too many ideas in our head, and we basically dial down the aperture. We limit the potential that can come through. And so on my journey towards learning more about shamanism, uh, I would like read books and get ideas and try their things. And I was like, and every single time, every process that was written in the book kind of like took my power away. And I realized every time I like obey this, like a formula, A plus B equals C, or was just doing it their way, and there was no room for me. There was no room to just be open to the infinite power of possibility. My experiences were hard and I had to work at it. I was like, this isn't natural. So in my mind, it's not natural to have a school of shamanism. It's not natural to have someone teaching and preaching and telling you the values of a culture or the formula, the legends, and the stories. I'm like, one, that age is over. Two, we don't know what it was really like. We don't. So it's probably best to go with where you're at now in the age and time period that you are. So I think a modern shaman is going to look way different. And I don't think you're going to get the power from trying to go back to tribe to reclaim the earth. Like we have this false concept that shamans love everyone and they're connected to God and the earth. Like we have this like false idea that Native Americans are about saving the earth and respect to the animals and natural resources. That's an aspect of their culture, but that's a very marginalized view. I mean, to really understand, you'd have to be one. And so I don't think anyone has a right to talk about it unless you're of that culture. So it might blow people's minds to realize Hawaiians have their own shamanic culture of like kahunas and all that stuff. It might blow people's minds that shamanism has been alive and thriving very well in Siberia. So it's like it's an umbrella word, but we kind of what we do to words is we have a definition and then we either change the definition or we change the word. So Jesus was cool until it wasn't cool. So now Jesus means love. So we try to, you know, so we say shamanism isn't cool. Oh, now shamanism is cool. But people won't like shamanism unless you pair it with psychology, like self help, and then and love for the land and love for animals, and we pair it with spirituality. So a lot of people go from religion to spirituality, and they have all that religious. The universe is or their mind is organized with religion. So there's values and ethics, do's and not do's, sacred and not sacred, worthy, unworthy, a heavenly realm, a spirit realm, and like I feel like the power of the shaman is not having that. If there is no heavenly realm and things aren't divided like that, like it's you creating it's your own mind map, it's your own psychological map, it's your own way of navigating reality and the other realms. And so your map should look different than the person next to you, and your technique, your way of understanding your body and life should be different than the next person. So I feel like with organized things, you lose yourself, you know? So that's really kind of what this is about. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I was like, don't you think your greatest teacher would be the earth if you're going to be like an earth loving shaman? Like, go hug a tree, go listen to a tree. Why are you hanging out with people? Or why are you listening to someone talk in English to you? Like like instead of trying to go get it from someone else, get it from your own 2 feet. Grow a garden, which would be a really powerful way to resurrect your inner shaman. Go camping by yourself or with your family every weekend. Go get acquainted with the earth. I really think growing a garden would be good to, it's like I love going to the river right by my house. You know, it's like I go wash my crystals there, or when I can't do that, I have my crystals in the house. It's like I'm surrounded by earth, life, the elements, you know? Um, and it doesn't have to be so mystical. It could be very earthy. It's like you could be a great shaman and not work with altered states of consciousness and power animals and spirit. Like you could be a very practical shaman. Like, so we tend to think with all those like guided, like Carlo Castaneda was basically the father of spiritual adventure books, uh, where he basically learned uh, Mexican shamanism to an extent, and it was a voyage in consciousness and all this stuff. We now think that shamanism has to do with like plant medicine and other dimensions. It can, but it doesn't have to be that. Like, and I really don't think shamanism really goes well with religion or psychology, you know? And in a weird way, I don't think shamanism is bound to even a culture and tradition. So I think even a shaman would be like, "Hey, I'm getting off the reservation." What? You are? Or I'm moving, or I don't want anything to do with you people. I want to go explore the unknown. And so this video is about, looking at everything a different way, challenging it, be an outsider to your own culture, and be careful of the white devil, because that's probably what's messing you up from success. um, so, living in the matrix, even the terminology wires your brain away, you know, like live in an unknown world, you know, live in the unknown. It doesn't have to be described. See it with new eyes, fresh eyes. That's the power of seeing. You know, it's like kind of like taking the filters off. And because you have no limits, reality becomes lucid. And you can see, like Merlin did, a different way. See, like a child sees, with their imagination, with creativity, with divine inspiration, with connection. The worlds can get jumbled. They can, like, the spirit world and the physical world can come together. They can interlock. And in that interlocking of the two worlds is the realm of the shaman, the known and the unknown, the described and the undescribed, the sane and the insane, the living and the dead. When you just like merge all the worlds, and it creates this other world where both can coexist. That's kind of like the shaman. It's like, so I think you can be a really powerful shaman without using the word Jesus and God, love and light. you know, uh, you can be a powerful shaman without power animals. You know, they can be tools, they can aid you on your journey, but I think you should know what the destination is. That quest for knowledge, which is a quest for personal power. To know, to have that curiosity to know, is a driving force to utilize your will, to pierce the veils. And I think it's like a knife. It can cut the veil open. Your own desire, your own curiosity will open your third eye. You know? I mean, so it's kind of like be you. We need more authentic shamans out there, mystics, wizards. And yeah, we're going to call it good.